And just like you would reset a laptop or a computer, and it was going to be rebooting your internal operating system. And I thought it was great, but everybody kind of,
Sure.
so that's like nobody's gonna understand what that means other than you. So me being a little nerdy thought that was really great. But
Well, I would have understood it. Just saying, I would have gotten it.
So that was the original idea.
Hi, I'm Kyle Werkerly, certified professional ghostwriter. I'm glad you're listening as I welcome industry experts to share stories of lessons learned the hard way, overcoming professional hurdles, turning experience into actionable knowledge, and how to connect with your target audience. This is the Career Challenges Podcast. Welcome to the Career Challenges Podcast. My guest is Jen Sugermeyer. She's an author, life coach, and motivational speaker. She's recently been interviewed on ABC and CBS to promote her new book entitled Reset. And she's also speaking on how to stay positive through the COVID crisis. And she's been featured in magazines, podcasts, and radio shows globally. So Jen, welcome to the show.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So your book, Reset, which just came out right in March, right? March 8th?
That's right. Uh-huh. Yep.
Awesome. So, my first question when I saw that, and, looking at your book and all the stuff that went into it, obviously the lead up to the premiere and the debut, were you doing a lot of marketing?
I had a coach as I was going through this, because this is not the first book that I've written, but it's the first one that I went to go publish. The other ones I would say were more therapy for me. And so I had a coach, and she was helping me along the process and helped me with the book itself. But, so we had talked about, the different landing pages to get VIP lists and, all the different things. So I was doing the best I could with trying to understand social media. It's a lot. I felt like I was wearing about 27 hats at the same time, building a website and doing the social media and doing all that. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of ramp up to that, up to the release.
Awesome. So then, of course, March 8th, COVID is still kind of not quite here. I was more aware of it, obviously, on March 8th than I was probably on March 7th. But then, I feel more or less March 10th through the 15th, that's when things really were hitting the fan, especially here in San Antonio. I know you're up in Dallas, and I'm how was it there? Were people getting really just tense, and was there a run on toilet paper at grocery stores there too?
Yeah, it was almost, it had a semblance of Y2K, like everybody was going to hunker down in their basement. Maybe that dates me, but yeah, I mean it was and I actually had sold my vehicle about 6 months ago, and so I had become accustomed to buying in bulk, but for about a month at a time. So I'd get that amount of toilet paper. I eat a lot of cans of tuna fish, like just the things that happened to be like the primary items during the COVID crisis were the things that I just naturally went to get. So then I went to the grocery store, and I'm like, what just happened here? Like everything that I was used to eating was gone. And it was a strange time.
Yeah. So then how has that affected your marketing for your book? Because obviously you were, trying to do more in-face or in-person kind of events or promotions. And now all that has literally been taken away. So I guess what is your plan now, and how have you adapted to this current situation?
Actually, I think it's been great. So I work with a PR company in Hollywood, and they've been able to, you mentioned CBS, ABC, Fox as well. And I've actually been anywhere. I've been sitting on my couch, but I was featured in Sacramento, Dallas, Austin. So I'm able to get to wherever. But the message that I'm delivering is really about positivity and how to stay positive in times of crisis. And so it aligned. It just so happened to align. I always had that date as my release date. But it happened to align at a time where it was something that answered the market's need. And so they were able to, this company has been really instrumental in getting me in different places. So it's been really great. I think it was good timing.
Awesome. So a little fortuitous. I know that's odd to say right now, but it was somewhat fortuitous.
I think so. I think, and I think this is really a time for coaches to really step up and help, because I think, it's so easy to get taken over by the wave, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
just it's scary. It's this we've none I spoke to my 88-year-old aunt, and she's like, "I've never seen anything like this." Like
Mhm.
literally
Yeah.
nobody's seen anything like this that's living on this earth. And so how do you adapt? And you're watching the stock market, you're watching the death toll, you're watching layoffs. There's just so many things that are out of our control. And so it's just understanding that, hey, you have, power and control over your situation. And so sometimes it just takes a coach or, someone that's got that has that perspective to just kind of remind people, especially in those times. So I think it's been very interesting timing, but it's been very good for me when my book came out, and kind of resetting the mindset.
There you go. It worked out. It worked out.
Hmm.
Yeah, because you had mentioned coaches stepping up. Previous guests I've had on the show, Ben Baker was the first one to come to mind. He's been doing free leadership coaching. You
Yeah.
you get an hour of his time for free, and he's a great guy. So that's a lot of good stuff happening there. And then Joe Pardo, that's how we met. We were both in
Yeah.
the independent podcast virtual summit. You were a speaker and I was a speaker, and that's how I became aware of you and wanted you on the show and invited you on the show. But he's been doing almost like a conference every weekend, a virtual
Yeah.
conference every weekend. And so at first I was impressed because, the independent podcast virtual summit, that was a 2-day event. He had, what was it? Something like 40 speakers, right?
40 speakers. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
unbelievable.
you, me, and more than 38 other people were coming together, and I was really impressed with that. And I thought that's really cool, him putting that all together. And then he just kept doing them. I'm like, okay, Joe, let's slow down here. So it's really cool to see those coaches step up that way, and
Hmm.
helping people usually gratis. They're doing it almost entirely for free, and that's
Hmm.
I know that's not going to be easy for them to sustain, but right now I think it's probably the best move that they could be doing.
Well, and you
Applaud
don't
them.
know
Yeah,
what's coming from that, down the line as well. So I think it's what you put out, you get back, and so yeah, there's a lot of those kinds of things going on. So it's really just interesting to watch as people are going through this and how they adapt.
definitely, definitely. So you're coaching, your life coach and motivational speaker as well. Have you always been doing this? Was that your dream when you were little?
Yeah, interesting. So no, I have not always been doing this, but I would say I'm probably more aligned with what I'm doing now as what I thought I would be doing when I was a child.
Hmm.
And I veered off for a long time. So I spent about 15 years in management. I was climbing the corporate ladder, working in IT actually. Um, Not really the technical one, but I know enough to be dangerous.
Hmm.
And I led teams for a long time, and that was my career path. And um, it was good. I learned a lot from it. I was really grateful to have the business experience, and then things happened in my life. And part of my story is I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I just, my life had become so completely unmanageable, and I had these two lives that I was leading, and it had been this way for decades. It really, it started out when I was in my teenage years with an eating disorder, and I had just learned to live this double life. And then fast forward into my mid 30s, and here I am, and it was, the unmanageability was me, in and out of jails, hospitals, running into work. I mean, talk about dysfunction. And I didn't share that with anyone. And so, at some point, once I got things on track, that's really when I catapulted into this next phase of my life. And to me, it's very rewarding. It's very gratifying. My corporate career was very good for what it was at the time, and kind of building a lot of skills, and then using my experience and everything that I've gone through. That's what built Reset, and that's what prompted me to write the book. And yeah, so I've definitely not always been in life coaching and all that. I had to scrape my knees on the bottom and keep dragging them around for another 20 years to get there.
Yeah, that's sometimes how it is. So then when was that moment or time, I mean, looking back, obviously, that you can point to when you started to realize, okay, maybe I can start to help people out of my own experience and knowledge?
I would say I was sober for probably about 8 months, and I realized that I was working a program, and I had been keeping track of everything that was working for me. And I did this just for me. I had told myself that I was committed to working on myself for an entire year. And I tried a whole bunch of different things, and I was writing things down. And then at about 7 or 8 months, I said, "Well, man, I'm working a program." And I would talk to some people and just kind of tell them things. They're like, "Man, that's so great," because I
Yeah.
know I have a problem, but like, I'm not going to go seek help. And some people just they just don't feel that. And I'm not saying don't go seek help, but my program is something that you can certainly work at home. I do always recommend people get help, but um, you know, but I told myself I wasn't going to start writing until my 1 year of sobriety. I really needed my, I needed everything to kind of level out.
Yeah.
I was everything from detoxing to getting my life back on track. And I needed to really have a solid foundation before I started writing. So on my 1 year sobriety date, that's when I started Reset.
Awesome. Awesome. So have you always, I guess, been writing and telling stories, or was that kind of a new thing for you, either through your addiction or afterwards?
This was actually my third book that I don't even know if I have the other two, but this was my third one that I had written. And my best friend, who I actually dedicated the book to, um, he committed suicide, and
Mm,
I never had closure with that. And that's when I
hmm
started writing. And writing to me was it was a therapy. It was a way for me to create a world or get that closure. And the first book, I wonder if it, I don't even know where it exists, but anyway, you know i I didn't have the opportunity to say goodbye to my best friend in person, but I did in the book.
hmm
And so it was that kind of thing. And that happened, oh gosh, back in 2005, maybe. I think it was 2005 that happened. And so that was when I first started writing, and I just really became connected to kind of the emotional or release or that went along with it. I just think there's so much power in writing.
hmm Definitely.
So,
It for me, it was, well, I'd always been writing stuff down when I was little, but it kind of became this coping mechanism because I graduated in '08. The housing market tanked, jobs just evaporated, and I assumed I would just be getting a job right then, and that didn't happen. So the writing became a coping mechanism. I discovered I really enjoyed it, and so I wanted to get into writing full time. And then some other life events happened that really pushed me into deciding, okay, this is what I want to do. But the therapy aspect of writing, and I've heard other people say that it's therapeutic for them as well, and other people who are recovering too. That writing is that way of them coping with their emotions or getting out of their mind. So I'm like, yes, I love that. Because even for me, even though I haven't been dealing with what you've been dealing, but I do definitely see that benefit of writing, and I hope more people hear this and decide to do that too, even if they're not dealing with something that you were dealing
and I think when you see things on paper, it brings it to life. And
with.
so, I think sometimes we get stuck in our own heads, and it's, you're just bouncing all these things around. I mean, I have like 50,000 ideas in my head at the same time, and it
Hmm
can just be overwhelming. But then when you write a list, or when you write or whatever, when you can conceptualize it out on paper, it brings a whole nother element to it. So I always encourage people to And writing lists. Oh gosh, I love writing lists. I think they're good. They help keep us focused. So
Sure, they organize. So just real quick, you'd mentioned you've written a couple other books, but you haven't decided to publish them yet. Are they fiction, nonfiction, or are they just kind of more your own work that you wanted to write for yourself?
yeah, I think more just for myself. They've so the first two were more just kind of getting through some situations. Although the one about my best friend, if I could ever find it, I would be interested maybe at some point publishing that one. But I am working on my second book, and by the time this airs, it probably will be live because it will be coming out shortly.
Awesome.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think writing has taken a big place in my life, and we'll definitely be seeing more books coming out of me.
Definitely. Well, that's always great. I always love to hear that authors are going to be putting out more books because we need more books. I know there's probably more books than we can handle right now, but we still need more books, more books, more books. So then, Reset. You kind of touched a little bit on why you wanted to write it and your motivations. But I mean, what was the real when you were trying to, I guess, pick an idea or pick a direction with the book? What did you settle on as this is what I'm going to write, this is how I'm going to write it, and this is who it's for? And what was that process like for you?
It was a pretty easy book for me to write in the sense that I wrote down everything that I went through. So
Mm,
it wasn't like I was, what characters do I want, or I mean, this was my real raw. This was everything, and I was very, very transparent in it. The original thought of Reset, because I have worked in IT, my original thought was I was going to have like a reset button on the front of the cover. And just like you would reset a laptop or a computer, and it was going to be rebooting your internal operating system. And I thought it was great, but everybody kind
mm,
of so
sure.
that's like nobody's gonna understand what that means other than you. So me being a little nerdy thought that was really great, but
Well, I would have understood it. Just saying, I would have got it. So
so that was the original idea. I mentioned I had a coach, and when I started working with her, I basically had the book done at that point, and we did a lot of kind of reformatting and kind of moving things around. Um, and Reset actually now stands for, and what I've had trademarked is recognize, eliminate, structure, elevate, and transform. And within those are so it's Reset: 5 steps to reclaim the life you thought you lost and learn to love yourself. And those are the 5 steps. And so within those 5 steps are all of the different steps that I took along the way. There's probably about four chapters or so in each of all the different things that I did, addressing my anger, reframing my brain, just becoming more positive, things like that. So, but that's so Reset now stands for those 5 words. And that's my trademarked coaching program now.
awesome, awesome. And you had mentioned Rachel Hollis, which is somewhat ironic because today she had a webinar with Donald Miller, and they talked about writing. And I don't think I've heard of Rachel Hollis before then, but then when I heard the name and I looked on the questionnaire you submitted, I was like, Rachel, that can't be the same one, but I'm assuming it is. So you had mentioned Rachel Hollis as your favorite author. Has she been a big influence on your writing and your writing style?
I would say yes. So I love her transparency. She is very candid, and she doesn't hold back. She's just very authentic to herself, and I just love that about her. I love the way that she can bring things to life. And she's written, I think 7 books or so. She kind of got famous with Girl Wash Your Face,
Hmm.
um, which just exploded.
Okay.
It was a huge, huge book. And
That's
then
where I
she
heard her from. I heard the name and I
yeah.
couldn't place it with the title. Yeah. So you were saying, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So she just I love her character. I love her demeanor. I love her honesty. Her style of writing. I don't know if she would say we have comparable writing styles, but I think, that there are elements that are very similar. It's just kind of say it like you're speaking, and just very transparent and honest. And I think, she's one thing that I've always been a bit frustrated with is we I think so many people try to hide what they don't want people to see. And, and I was that way for a long time because I thought you had to be kind of, have this perfect life, and so I struggled with that for many, many years. And so when people come out and, are honest about just even daily little things, you're like, oh, it's real people. Oh, and it's just, and that's who she is. So yeah, Rachel Hollis, she's great.
Awesome. Were there other authors that influenced you?
Uh, I don't know if this is maybe cliche at this point, but I love Brene Brown. I know she's kind of become huge, but I think she's another one that I really connect with. And she too, she's just very honest and open and talks about vulnerability. And I think she's incredibly vulnerable and lays it all out there. But she does it in a very respectful way as well. I think a lot of people look at her as this, so I think Rachel's from Texas too. And so is Brene actually. And we live in Texas. So there's a lot of good stuff happening down here in Texas. So,
obviously.
But yeah, Brene Brown is pretty spectacular.
Awesome. Yeah. I've heard of Brene. I haven't read any of her stuff yet. I keep saying this, and this is becoming my cliche, but it's on my reading list. I'll get to it. Other guests have mentioned books and they keep going on the list, and I say I'm going to read it. And so I promise I will. I'll get to it someday before I die. But I'll definitely read Brene Brown and Rachel Hollis. Definitely, since I've heard her on that webinar with Donald Miller, and I read How to Build a Story Brand, his book on writing and specifically narrative based marketing. When it comes to your writing style and how you wanted to, I guess, package your message, were you focusing more on the narrative, or was it really more the concept?
I think it was more of the concept at first. And I think now that I'm going into my, we'll just call it my second book. I think I've learned my voice a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think I really wanted to get the content out, and, and my coach, I had to go back through and rewrite a lot of it, because she said, Jen, when I talk to you, and, I'm a pretty dynamic person. I have a pretty big personality, and she would tell me, she says, Jen, I don't feel that. It's not coming across. Like, it's just kind of like, here's some suggestions, and I think that's something, as writers, we've got to understand these things about our, how you talk to your audience, and how do you show them instead of talking to them. And so, my coach really helped me. So I ended up having to rewrite a lot of it, but, I got the content out of what I wanted to deliver. And then she really helped me. We kind of backed into, okay, scrap this, rewrite it. Don't tell me, show me, show me through stories. Cause that's really what people remember. Sitting in a lecture in a town hall can be kind of boring, but if you're in like a movie, if you're in a story, that's what people remember. And so a lot of my first book didn't come across that way, and I had to go back and rewrite it. My second one, it's all stories. And so, yes, I'm based on the content, but I think I understand my delivery, and how and my writing style a lot better.
Definitely. Yeah. A lot of authors say their first book, even though it was great and they got it published, they look at it and they're like, oh, I could have done better. And I think, that just comes with years of experience, because we want to be great. And we think, whatever we're putting out now is probably the best it's ever going to be for us, only to realize the next year, oh, we can do better. So, I've heard that from so many authors. Stephen King, you've probably heard the story that he threw Carrie away, and his wife pulled it out of the garbage and said, I think there's something here, work on it some more. And that was his first hit. So, even the first novel can end up in the garbage and still be a massive bestseller. So I think you're in good company. Would you like to be a guest on the Career Challenges podcast? Go to careerchallengespodcast.com to find out how. While you're there, check out other episodes and download them through Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Castbox, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. The Career Challenges podcast is hosted by me, Kyle Weckerly. I'm a certified professional ghostwriter who works with business thought leaders and industry experts to write polished manuscripts, assess their publishing options, and create book marketing plans. I've worked with consultants, high-ticket salespeople, coaches, speakers, C-level executives, and business owners. My authors have worked for USAA, Vistage, Booz Allen Hamilton, Austin Technology Council, and Twitch. My authors know that writing a book will help them change the world. They know that the story they tell will create that change. So they want to write a book to serve as a platform for their marketing endeavors. They know a published book will help them secure more speaking gigs, market their expertise, promote a product or service, and more. So reach out to Kyle Weckerly at weckerlywriter.com to start your publishing journey. Maybe you're not ready to start that journey just yet, but you do know that you want to write a book. So where to begin? Well, if you're ready, go to weckerlywriter.com to download 101 questions to ask before writing your book. This will help you get started and will offer guidance on the next steps to turn your ideas, experience, and actionable knowledge into a completed manuscript. Just visit weckerlywriter.com to get your free copy today. That's weckerlywriter.com. weckerlywriter.com. And now, back to the Career Challenges podcast. You said you're doing kind of another job before you went into life coaching or motivational speaking, I should say. So when did you decide, okay, I wanted to do life coaching or motivational speaking as well? How did you start making that transition from one to the other, and what was your plan?
So like I mentioned, I was working with my coach, who was both a writing and a business coach. And so we started coming up with, developing speeches, and so while I was working my full-time job, my other 27 hats that I was doing, I created my LLC. I started just doing all of these things in the back end, social media, trying to understand that, just getting out in front of people and solving, fulfilling their need. And yeah, I mean, it's it's all about networking. It's all about getting out in front of people and and even where I'm at today, I know I'll look back in 5 years and say, oh my gosh, I remember when, kind of when I look back at my first book and I say, oh my gosh, I could have done so many things differently, but I think you just kind of, you need to start. And so now this is my full time, right? And at some point you just say, okay, well, I am, what am I doing? What's the direction that I want to take? And it was a lot for me to manage having a full-time, I was a senior director, and I, had a team. I was traveling all the time, and it was a lot for me to do. But I'm grateful my circumstances allowed me more time, after hours, i.e. that means I'm single with no kids. So I had more time to put things together after hours and all that. And so I just started building kind of in parallel until I was ready to make that change.
You also stated that you do public speaking as well. And you mentioned Brene Brown. She does a lot of public speaking too. But what were your influences when it came to public speaking?
Yes, I would say absolutely, Brene. She can, when she delivers a speech, oh my gosh, she is just amazing. And I saw this lady the other day on one of these free things. We were talking about some of these free courses, and her name was Julie, I think Storin. Oh my gosh, I don't know. She just the delivery, when people can tell their story and you connect with it, even though you've not experienced it, but they're able to relate it to your life in some way. It's captivating. And I find that's how Brene is. And again, that was another thing that I worked with my coach on, was really, how do you tell stories? How can you get your point to come across? And so that was a lot of the things we were doing in tandem while I was working. But yeah, Brene Brown, Absolutely. She actually has a Netflix. So,
Hmm.
so if you've got like an hour, I would look at her Netflix. I forget what it's called, something on vulnerability, but,
Yeah.
she's just amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So that would be a good little intro to the Brene Brown world for you.
Awesome. Yeah, because I hadn't heard of her until she did that Netflix special, and then after that, I saw her everywhere. So
Yeah. 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 I think that kind of put her on the map, just like, Girl Wash Your Face put Rachel on the map. But they were ready. I mean, these are things that these ladies had been doing for years and years and years. And so it wasn't that that was just their one thing. I mean, this was a culmination of almost decades for Rachel. I mean, she was doing this for 15 years before she ever I don't know, got discovered or kind of
hmm
became popular. So,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. So, how long have you been doing, I guess, public speaking engagements?
I would say for about a year now.
Mhm.
And so I've, excuse me, in work, that's certainly something that came with my job, speaking at global conferences and in front of leadership teams and things like that. But kind of stepping out and talking about my story really has been probably within the last year or so. So it's an interesting time that now the COVID crisis is
Yeah.
has kind of come up. That's canceled a lot of things, but I think it's just kind of reshifted everybody's. Okay, well, what do we do now, or how can we? And which is where I found Joe, Joe
hmm
Pardo. So
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah.
And so, yeah, he found me too. He got on my podcast and he invited me to be part of the independent podcast group on Facebook. And then that's when I started finding even more guests. And so, that's obviously how I found you, Jen. But it's amazing how he's created his own kind of, I guess, well, community obviously would be a great word for it. But we're all podcasters, and it's like Cheers, like how they did that in Cheers. Everyone showed up there after work and just start talking about their day, and that's kind of the vibe I get from the independent podcasters there, especially at the conference. I was listening to some of the other speakers, and I'm like, well, they're just like me, so it's not just me in my little office here in San Antonio trying to get a podcast going. It's people all across the country and the world, so it's
Yeah.
really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of good content he had. And it was good. It's
Yeah.
good.
So you said you did public speaking for your previous position, and that was more corporate and probably very uh, business and professional. And I'm going to show you X, Y, and Z. And then now you're talking about reset and transforming and being very vulnerable from the stage. Have you run across somebody who's seen you in both settings? Have you had that opportunity?
Um, yeah, I mean, there have been people that I've worked with that have since followed me, and they'll watch me on TV, or I don't know if they've seen any of my speeches per se. But I will say my parents were at one of my speeches,
Wow.
and my mom asked me. She looked up at me because she's much smaller than I am, and she said, "Is this weird that we're here?" Because both my parents were there, and I looked down at her and I said, "Yes." I mean, it's because it's really. I mean, I'm talking about things that I kept, hidden for so long. There's such a stigma around them, and the reason I'm stepping out and speaking out is because I'm tired of people feeling like they can't.
Mhm.
And the reality is that so many of us are suffering with something. And I'm not an addiction coach. I don't want to be an addiction coach. That's just my story, right? I want to help people reconnect with who they are. Addiction just happens to be my thing. But it's still kind of it's one of these things you talk about and you're like, yeah, I was in and out of jails and hospitals, and then like your mom is standing next to you.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, sorry. I mean, thank goodness I told her about at least a couple of the times, but
Yeah.
so it wasn't like that, like huge shocker. But I kept a lot of things. I mean, my parents didn't know about the domestic violence until they read my book.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
it was I just laid it all out there. And again, I think that was very therapeutic for me and for them and all that. But anyway, so back to your question. Yeah. I don't know if anyone's seen my speeches, but I know that they're following me in different capacities, and it always warms my heart when I see that. But definitely my parents have seen me. and, and it was an interesting, yeah. You just
Hmm.
got to get over it. I just had to step out. I just had to. It helped me
Yeah,
more than anything. So,
definitely. Well, the reason why I ask, is other people that I've known, I've seen them in different settings, and it's always that weird, like, oh, well, you're professional and you know what you're talking about, or you've gone through this and you're sharing these stories that I've never heard from you. So I'm always curious, like, how people kind of perceive that from you. And given that you've done a lot of speaking, I was wondering, is there that one person who saw it in both lights, and what was their take on it? So I was just curious.
I will say when I stepped out and started saying that I was an alcoholic, there were a lot of people that just really were in a lot in, oh, you're not, that's not you, or that
Hmm.
can't be you. And you're just maybe a bad drinker. Maybe you just drank too much at one time or whatever. And so, there were people that saw me kind of in both worlds. Um, and it's sometimes hard for people to wrap their head around,
Hmm.
sometimes it's like, everybody's in the office and you wear a suit to the office, but then you have like family day at the office and then everybody comes in a t-shirt and you're like, oh my gosh, you wear t-shirts. It's just, it's
Yeah.
like kind of a shock. Like, I'm only used to seeing you in a certain way, and now I see you in a different way.
Mm.
And so I think that certainly I get that, whether it be some of these people from corporate that are now following me, through social media,
Hmm.
and just seeing what I look like without a suit on, or, some of my friends that thought, everything was okay because I kind of kept things at bay, and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea all this stuff was going on. And it's just, sometimes I think it's hard for people to connect the dots a little bit because, if you don't see things and you're just told them, it's hard to imagine. And I lived a life that looked very, very picturesque from the outside. I traveled all around the world. I've been to 49 countries. Like,
Wow.
I stay very fit. I'm very active. Like, um, I've got a ton of friends. I was scaling the corporate ladder at a house. Like, I had all these great things. So then for me to talk about all this dysfunction, it's like, what? I don't even get it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've certainly gone through a lot of that as I've kind of transitioned out, but they'll get over it.
Yeah. Sure.
They'll get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. People got to accept you for who you are. I have an uncle who's in recovery. He's been in recovery, I think, all my life, from what I can recall. And every time I see him, I want to talk to him about it. I'm naturally curious, and I know that's probably a bad thing in this situation because I just want to poke and find the stories. But at the same time, it's something that I feel he's isolated himself from the family about. And I don't want that. I want my family to really know each other and to be connected in all those different ways. And so it's always this, what do I say and how do I approach him, and what do I do? So that's just something I'm always dealing with, and I'm always just curious, for other people who've been in that situation.
Yeah, and I know my parents have gone. I think they still go through that. They're like, reading this book and reading about the domestic violence, and it's like, oh, I don't want to ask who, and it's just, and for a long time, and just kind of shifting to the topic of sobriety. I mean, it's a very to especially if you have a lot of failed attempts, that
Mm.
it's a tough thing to go through. And when you're like, when you say your sobriety date and you blow it, and other people are kind of, they remember that date, and it becomes kind of this awkward thing. And so it's strange for them, it's strange for you. But I will say, being on this side of where I'm at now, it is so much better for me to just be open and honest about it. And I welcome those questions. I don't hide anything. If my parents wanted to know, then they can certainly ask. um and I think that's where we start to heal, is when we start to let things go and talk about them. And so for me, telling my story not only helps others, but it helps me as well. So it's kind of this mutual thing. So, I don't know your uncle, but I will say, for me, I welcome those kinds of conversations, and that kind of just breaks the ice some. I mean, there could be some things that he still feels like, I don't know what I should do. And if you just kind of all come to the table and say, let's just talk about this, you'd be amazed at what breaking that ice can do for relationships. I've certainly seen my relationship improve with my family and with friends and all that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for that piece of advice. So then shifting gears here a little bit, you talked about writing, your books and they're nonfiction. If you were to write a fiction book, what would be your preferred genre?
Oh my goodness. Um,
Yes, the real challenging question now.
it really is. I was like trying to think what I like to well, I don't know what you watch on TV. I like watching like mindless stuff. Um, so I don't know. I think it would probably be a comedy
Hmm.
in some respect. And I have this laundry list of things that I want to do in my life. And it's pretty extensive. And one of which is to get on a stage and do a comedy skit. So
Oh, yes.
I feel like that would be my writing style if I was going to write a fiction book.
Yeah.
I would just have to put humor. There'd probably have to be a tall girl in there because I'm 6'1". I can relate,
Yeah.
probably be traveling because I can relate, something like that. So
Awesome.
yeah, I'm not like an action or a serious or a sci-fi. I don't know if that would be hard. That would be really tough for me to write about because it really, I don't know. I'm just kind of
Well, that's awesome. Well,
like
yeah,
comedies.
I have like thought, well, maybe I would be a good comedian, but I've looked at professional comedians. I've watched a lot of their clips, not just for the entertainment value in them, but also because they're really good storytellers. They have to
Mhm.
set up the joke. They have to put you in the mood. They have to get across, kind of how things are, and then they have to deliver that punchline, and they have to do it in such a way that you don't see it coming, but then you can see it coming, but also that you find it funny in a broad sense. And they have to do it, just so fast on the stage. And if
Yeah.
something changes, like Robin Williams had said, of course you have to know comedy, because if you deliver a joke and they don't laugh, then tragedy. And I'm like, that's so true. So, the comedians, I've been studying them for their comedic value, or I could say I've been studying them. Really, I'm just watching clips for the laugh. But then you realize, okay, they're telling a story here, and so I can analyze how they do that. So yeah, I would love to have that opportunity to get on a stage and try and do a stand up set. But I'm sure I would not be anywhere near even some of the worst comedians I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I may flop on my face, but I have an aspiration to do it. I think I want to do everything. Like I want to record a song. I want to do everything. So that's on my bucket list. So yeah, so that was a really good question. I've never been asked that before, but I'm going to say it's probably going to be some type of comedy. It's just going to be lighthearted because I don't really know how to do anything else. I have no
True.
experience in the action thriller sci-fi realm. Although I'm a pretty big Star Wars fan.
Yes, Star Wars.
Yeah.
Well, based on a lot of action movies I've seen, I would say a lot of action writers have no experience in action. So I'm just
Mm.
putting that out there, uh, from my humble opinion of watching action movies. Um, so of course, with your book Reset, and it's out now. Is there a print and a ebook version?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
So it's on Amazon. It's let's see, Barnes and Noble. There's a lot of different ebooks that are out there. So I think it's like Apple and Rakuten. There's like a whole bunch of different ones, but I think
Yeah.
the paperback ones are only Barnes and Noble and Amazon right now.
Awesome. Awesome.
Hmm.
And I guess, are you going to do an audio version of the book at any
I
time?
am. I am, yeah. And I started it and I'm gonna have to redo it because I don't think the levels on my mic were right. And I saved them
True.
as MP3 files instead of WAV files. And
Uh,
apparently it's better to do them in WAV. But
mm,
but I did, and that is such an incredible, like, I have never been more aware of every time I like wanted to take a breath or swallow
mm,
or, just any little movement. I mean, wow. But, I think, I'm about to come out with my next book and I think I want to do the Audible before I release that book because as I was going through my first book, I thought, oh, well would I have said it that way, or anyway. So I think when you read it out loud, it takes a certain life to it. And so I think that's a good practice. So we'll see, but I plan on doing audibles for both, and I want to do them myself. And yeah, but I will not be doing the editing. I'm not doing the editing whatsoever, but I will do the voice.
Yes. Yeah. The editing is the hard part, especially with this podcast, because as long as we're sitting down and talking, I'm taking that much time and more to edit it. So when you think of an audiobook, how many pages are there? And then how many takes per page are you doing? So, how long is the audio program? Maybe 5-6 hours. So you're probably tripling that just in editing time. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of time. I forget his name. He's a big name audiobook narrator, not Scott Brick, but Alan something. But he was telling a story of how every time he tells people I narrate audiobooks, and they're like, "Oh, I would love to do that." And at first he's like, "Well, that's cool. Let's talk about it." But then he started to realize, okay, there's more to it than just I'm sitting in a room and reading. So he started to say, "Well, no, you don't. No, you don't want to narrate audiobooks. It's hard work." And they're like, "Really?"
Yeah.
He goes, "Just picture yourself sitting down 8 hours a day and just reading out loud. And that's all you do. You don't have any human interaction. You're not, water cooler talk or anything. You're just sitting and reading. So if you can't do that 8 hours a day, weeks on end, then you shouldn't narrate audiobooks." And so he found that really kind of culled those people out, the ones who really wanted to do it, as opposed to those who thought it was just, oh, that would be fun.
I don't think it's fun. I mean, I think it's fun for me because it's my book, it's my voice. Like, I know how it should come across, but I think that's very hard for people. I mean, especially if it's a book with many characters and you have to be consistent with their voice, and there's a lot to it. There's definitely a lot to it. So, but yeah, I think, just given that it's a self-help book and it's my story, I think it makes sense for me to do it. I can't imagine having like some guy read my book or something like that. We listen to it and it be a man's voice, or, even a woman's voice that doesn't, I think to me, it makes sense for me to do it, but I am not going to try to do the editing.
True. Yeah. Props to you. So obviously your book, one more time, what's the name of your book?
Okay. Reset. It's the 5 steps to reclaim the life you thought you lost and learn to love yourself.
Yes. And it's available
by
on
Jen Sugermeyer.
Jen Sugermeyer. Yes.
By Jen Sugermeyer.
Available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, you said, in the print versions there, and then they can get the ebook pretty much anywhere ebooks are available, right?
It's distributed to a lot of different places. So jensugermeyer.com is my website. So sugar is spelled with an E, more like the hooked on phonics than the English language. But as long as you spell it right, you will find me. I am the one and the only, so you won't get mixed up with anybody else. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, sort of Twitter, but I don't really understand that. I try, but anyhow, so jensugermeyer.com is where I have all my information. And I always offer a 10% discount for anyone who references listening to me on a podcast and is interested in life coaching services. So yeah, all that information is out there. There's also a freebie that I put, and so people can go out there, but it's really how to reconnect with yourself. And I think that's a really good thing for all of us to be mindful of. And so, I would welcome you to go out there and just go grab it. It's on the main page. It's in green for free. And that's that. So jensugermeyer.com is where you find it all.
Awesome. And you had mentioned you have a book coming out. Do you have any other speaking engagements coming up? Virtual ones, obviously.
I have. Well, this will have aired, but I'm on Fox News tomorrow.
Oh, awesome!
So there's that. Yeah, tomorrow morning. I've got a handful of podcasts. I stay pretty busy doing those. But as for any conferences or anything like that, everything's kind of taken a turn.
Yeah.
With this COVID. So
like we said,
we'll just rebuild that.
Yeah. Like we said with Joe Pardo, I saw the announcement on like a Thursday. That following Monday, he told me, okay, you're going to be speaking that following Sunday. So it was just a real quick turnaround with that. And so some of those I see popping up, and I've pitched to a couple more. I just haven't heard back from them. So yeah, there's those popping up here and there. So hopefully we'll have more of those coming our way as well.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. So, well, Jen Sugermeyer, thank you so much for being on the Career Challenges podcast with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Career Challenges podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and like the Career Challenges podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Visit careerchallengespodcast.com for more information. And if you really like me, then you'll write a review. And don't forget to pick up your free copy of 101 Questions to Ask Before Writing Your Book by visiting weckerlywriter.com. That's WECKERLYWRITER.com.